All yours.
All right. Hi, folks. My name is Jen. I also go by the online handle Jen Foxbutt. So if you are a maker or if you like poke around with electronics in the kind of DIY space, you might have come across one of my tutorials. But these days, most of my life is spent working on and thinking about AI systems and agents in particular. And I'm going to define agents because it is a term that means everything and nothing now. So I like to kind of harken back to the technical definition, where an agent is a piece of software, a software system, which is a combination of some sort of AI or ML model, plus some like wrapper code. Typically, we call that some orchestration code to get the AI model or ML model to do what you want it to do, to accept inputs and generate outputs, that type of thing. And then typically an agent is maybe a little different than the initial versions of ChatGPT, in that it also has some set of tools and skills that it can do. So for example, APIs to be able to search the web. And so that is an agent, an AI ML model, plus some wrapper code, plus some tools and skills. From that perspective, I've really been focusing on the human interaction piece with AI systems. And so thinking about what is the UI, what is the UX or user interface, user experience of working with these agent systems. And so I've kind of touched on a lot of different things. I worked on voice a lot last year. I'm kind of in this we call it Horizon 2 space, where I look at things that are coming down the pipeline in 2 to 3 years, and I think about what do we need to do today to prepare for that. So it's a really, really interesting space. And I will say I have never seen an industry move this fast before, because traditionally what we thought of as H2 stuff, instead of 2 to 3 years, it's now, 8 months, sometimes to a year. For example, I was looking at computer using agents last year, maybe about 8 months ago. And so I wrote a research paper about it, and then cut to January and OpenAI releases Operator, and everybody was like, what are these things? And I was like, whoa, we were supposed to have a little more time on this, but here's the paper. So it's space to work in. My whole goal is to focus on human-centered needs. So human-centered design with these systems. And sometimes it might seem obvious, but sometimes we forget when people are really excited about technology. Sometimes we forget that we are building these things for people, right? We're building them so that to make our lives easier, to do the things, to help us do the things that are really difficult for us, to help us do the things that we don't want to do. I mentioned when Zach and I were talking that I ran a business and there was a lot of administrative BS that I had to do. If I was still running a business full time, I would be so stoked at the AI capabilities that are coming out, because it can make it so much easier to handle all of the paperwork, to handle all of these little tasks that a business owner has to do on a day-to-day basis. So there's a lot of really, really cool benefits to AI, but we have to be really careful about the ways in which we build them and the ways in which we think about designing them, and making sure that we are keeping human needs in the loop. So some suggestions as you're getting started. So some of the things that agents should be doing, number one, broaden and scale human capabilities. So for example, helping us brainstorm, helping us problem solve, doing automations on the types of tasks that we don't necessarily want to do. And I kind of use this term of dull, dirty, or dangerous tasks, or things that are difficult for an individual to scale. The second thing we want agents to do is to help us fill in our knowledge gaps. So for example, get me up to speed on knowledge domains, go and find this data that is missing for me, help me get some data that I need to accomplish this task, help me do translations, that type of thing. The third area of things that we want agents to do, facilitate and support collaboration in the ways that we as individuals prefer to work with other people. So AI systems, agents should be helping me to connect with other people, not replacing my connections with other people, right? And then finally, this is kind of like a pie in the sky, but like agents should help us be better versions of ourselves. So be that life coach or taskmaster, help us triage and prioritize notifications, help us upskill, help us learn emotional regulation and mindfulness skills, and help us build resilience. Just really like kind of being that like maybe not replacing connections with other people, because like I talk to my friends about a lot of these things, but what is really interesting is when I chat with my friends and sometimes they're using ChatGPT, is like, let me just like, it's like a journal kind of like, let me vent and just like dump everything onto this system that I'm not going to hurt its feelings, so I can say whatever I want, and then it'll kind of reflect back to me and help me process these things, and then I can go and talk to a human. So I think that that's a really cool way to use AI, because it's just like a journal. It is a tool for us to be able to build better skills or to practice skills and to just get help with things that are hard. We're squishy humans. It's hard to be a squishy human. Okay, so those are the things that agents should be doing. Some of the ways that my collaborators and I have been thinking about like the agent UI and UX space is to break it down into 3 different categories. The first category is how an agent might operate over its environment, which includes potentially physical spaces, but right now primarily digital spaces. So when we think about that space, I guess the 3 areas, so how agents operate over space or within their environment, how agents operate over time, because we're building memory systems, they will have historical knowledge, and then how we build the core of the agent itself. So a couple of things to keep in mind when we are building agents and thinking about how they operate in their environment. We want to think about how they connect us with other people instead of like, avoiding collapsing relationships. So we want agents to help us connect with people, help us connect with events that are happening in our area or virtual events that we can attend, and have actionable knowledge to enable collaboration and connection with other humans, other people. In terms of time, you break it down into past, present, and future. So in the past, how do agents reflect on the history that includes both the agent state as well as the context? And how can we use past knowledge to inform present context? For present states, agents are going to have probably a lot of notifications, and we want to really think about how do we prioritize those notifications? How do we merge them with existing notifications? How do those notifications change across cultures and across different disciplines? How do we avoid overwhelming people? And also making sure that humans are in the loop and that are any types of sensitive actions that an agent might need to do requires human approval. So sensitive actions would be things, I would generally say anything that is irreversible. So something like a financial transaction, purchasing something, transferring money to different bank accounts or whatever. Sending communications. So maybe an agent will draft a communication, but I should be the one to review it and send it. Those types of actions, which are irreversible. And then as we think about agents, how they operate in the future, how do they adapt? How do they evolve? And how do we inform users of those types of capabilities? How do we enable people to control how agents adapt and evolve? What information are they going to use from the past and the present to adapt and evolve? How do we give feedback? How are we informed of the feedback that we give those systems? And like how that feedback is used to modify the system. All of that should be transparent and easily, hopefully, explainable to the user. And then finally, for the agent core, one big piece I want to call out is the fact that like LLMs, AI models in particular, ML models a little bit less so, but AI models are non-deterministic. We can think about that as a feature of the system. So how can we embrace uncertainty, but also establish trust? And I also want to call out the fact that like I've seen a lot of folks get really excited about that technology and kind of forget about all of these traditional software traditional software tools and processes that we already have. So making sure that when you're designing your agent system, not everything needs to go to the AI model, full stop. Not every problem needs an LLM. And so at what point does your agent hand something off to like a traditional software like calculation? Do you bake those skills in so that you can have a natural language interface, and then behind the scenes, you know, you're doing like your traditional software engineering practices on the back end. So that's really important to consider. A couple of other two things that I'll say around non-determinism is that we have to be really careful about how we inform users about results coming from agents. So especially for fields like healthcare and finance, right? Because we are starting to see this paradigm of citations, but customer research actually indicates that citations can be problematic because sometimes they result in false or misplaced confidence in results. So there was a study that like the user researchers asked people to use ChatGPT or Copilot to answer a series of questions, and 2/3, and then they like filled out a survey based on what they had talked to Copilot about. And 2/3 of the people got the answers wrong, but they were very confident that they got them right. And so and it was because they used the citations, but the citations were wrong, or they cited something that was really, really old, you know, from like 10 years ago, which wasn't relevant anymore. So how do we think about informing the user that a system might be non-deterministic or uncertain without without giving them false hope? And then the second thing I'll say about Agent Core is that users really need controls for what the system knows. They need to approve anything that needs a sensitive action, like I mentioned, and they need visibility into how the agent is designed. So generally, I advise people when they build these systems that have human users on the end, that there should be some sort of profile for the agent as well as an action ledger, so that people can go and see what's the underlying AI model. Maybe they can't see the system prompt depending on what application you're building it for, but if it's possible, show them the system prompt, show them how the agent is kind of created on the back end, what tools and skills does the agent have access to, what data does it have access to, what can it do, what can it not do, and then for that action ledger, what are the actions that the agent has taken, and how can you, at what point do you intervene, at what point can you reverse those actions, etc. I want to pause because I've like given you done a little brain dump. Does anybody have any questions at this point?
Yes. I have a question. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Hi, Jen. Thank you so much for your time. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Awesome. So yeah, my name is Sumer. I'm getting started to learning about AI agents. I think the hard thing is I want to use this technology to do a lot of these repetitive tasks at scale. And with that, from like the maker's perspective, it's hard for me to validate sort of, okay, the results I'm getting are actually correct because I can't manually go through a lot of those. And on the flip side, when you kind of talked about from the customer perspective, right? It's like, okay, this agent is producing some data for me or doing some work, but how does the customer trust that it's correct? That's like something that I'm not sure what the right answer is at right now. You mentioned some things that's showing like that chain of thought or like showing like your work, kind of like how we learned it in school. So yeah, my question generally is, how can users sort of, what can we do as a maker to help our customers trust the output, right? Especially at scale, no one can manually check it, right? So
yeah,
and people always ask, hey, what's your source? You're asking me to make a decision or the data, like how do I verify this looks right? So this is something just in general I think is really hard. So I'd love your opinion on that.
It's totally hard. And you really targeted one of the big areas that is under development, is like, how do you evaluate these agentic systems? One thing that people are starting to think about is visualizations. Is there a way like a picture speaks 1,000 words, that type of thing. Or like whenever I came from physics, and so it's like when we had to deal with a shit ton of data, and so we used visuals, we used graphs to basically figure out trends and patterns and outliers and all of that good stuff. And so how can we take those tools from the sciences, from data science, and use that to simplify the picture for literally simplify the picture for our users. The other thing that I would say is that kind of coming back and really thinking about what AI models are good at and what they're not good at, and separating those out and using the AI model to help you with specific parts of the system that it will be good at and effective at. And then kind of going back to traditional, or it's kind of funny we're calling it traditional, but like generally accepted software engineering practices. So not everything has to go through the AI model. And so if there's ways, like if you're data scraping, like we have tools for that, right? We have tools to do data analysis that don't necessarily require an AI model. And I might actually encourage people to think about how can you, like ML models are much more accurate than LLMs. And so how might we combine LLMs with ML models to get more accurate results? And then as you're building these systems, I would say like definitely, yes, you cannot look at every single result, but you should be at least like looking at kind of some like, at least like take some samples and check. Here's a good one. So when I was doing my taxes for my business, I don't have like an automated system set up. So I have to like go through my credit card statement and like pull it over and just like fill it into the little like Excel spreadsheet that I have. And I was like, maybe ChatGPT can help me with this. And it actually, like, it was kind of helpful for a little bit, but then it got dates wrong. And so I was like, oh shit, like I can't use this now because it's making up dates. It was helpful for kind of this like high level, help me identify some of these like high level categories and pull out some of the transactions. But we really, as developers and as people that are building these systems, we really have to do our due diligence to check, at least, take a sample of like 100 and verify that it's accurate. And if it's getting 20 out of 100, right, you're like, well, maybe try a different approach. If it's getting 80 out of 100, right, that could be potentially useful depending on the scenario. Is that helpful?
Yeah, that's really helpful. Thank you. And I think the visualizations is very interesting because I think definitely I'm trying to figure out ways to I know ML is kind of like a black box for folks. So maybe showing like, hey, like this is maybe not the terms like precision recall, but hey, this is like we manually sample it as a like team of humans, and here's like the benchmark, and there's some things to think about. I'll think about using visuals for sure. Thank you.
Totally. Yeah, and my brain is a little squishy right now, but I think there are a lot of ways to use graphs and to use statistics to help people, or at least like help help you understand how the system is behaving. And I agree that precision and recall are useful, but it's not enough. Yeah. But yeah, graphs.
Thank you.
Yeah, totally. Great question. And you're not alone. This is a hard problem that a lot of really smart people are struggling with. Were there any other questions?
I was going to ask on the messaging piece. So one of the methods that we discussed of finding this correct information is maybe emailing these folks, getting a response and parsing it. Would you suggest, based on what I've heard earlier, is don't just send that to 1,000 people? What of our judging criteria that pissed off the other people on the nonprofit's behalf? So how would you balance getting that accuracy of information versus waiting to do it manually for each one of those?
So like you want to use an agent to email people, or?
Yeah, so hypothetically, if we're checking if our provider's information is correct, one way to do that is find the email address, email them. If they respond XYZ, like I am correct, or why are you emailing me? Great, they exist, validate it, right? But we don't want to send, hey, we're nonprofit X checking if you exist, because that's bad. So would you have the nonprofit like approve every single message, or send out a ton not related to the nonprofit and say this is just checking? Or get any thoughts in that space? Would love to hear.
I think, using using AI systems, using agents to draft these types of messages is fine. I think we want to be really careful when we start to edge into like anything that might be considered spamming territory. And like, it's not to say that like that's not going to happen, because like you build a tool and like some people are going to use it appropriately and some people are going to not. And that's just how it is. You put guardrails in place to make sure that we do. But yeah, I think, you know, really think about like, what is the overarching problem? And like, are there other ways? What are all of the solutions, right? And what solutions exist outside of AI? And I think doing that like design thinking process of, here is our problem and here are possible solutions, some of which might be AI and others aren't. And then seeing like, what is the simplest approach that we can take? And AI, you might be surprised when you do that process, because like what I've found sometimes is like AI might be a small slice, but not the whole solution. And so you can use AI to help scale, to help some of those like more mundane tasks. But then when it comes to like connecting with people, maybe you don't use AI. If you do decide that you want to use AI, just be very clear that like this is an automated message. Like a human was involved in sending it or something like that, but just informing people and letting them know and being transparent about where it's coming from.
That's really helpful. Thank you.
Great. Okay. Yay. Any other questions before I kind of wrap up and give my little spiel to y'all cool people building stuff?
I think that's it for questions.
Nice. Okay. So I guess what I would end with is just like, what we can imagine is what we build. I think that sometimes people, especially that work in tech, kind of assume that like AI is inevitable, or certain technologies are inevitable, certain like applications of technologies are inevitable. And I definitely disagree with that. What we invest our time and resources in is what we build. With some caveats, teleportation and time travel, very difficult. So, but like, if it falls within the boundaries of physical laws, and we put a lot of time and effort into it, we will probably be able to make it happen. With AI, you can harken back to the 50s and 60s, and there was a lot of investment from the Department of Defense in building out these systems, which, you know, is informative and also illustrative that like a lot more money has been poured into AI development than into, say, fusion technology. And so like, that's all to say that like we're very good at being imaginative. And so think about how we might use these types of tools to build the world that you want to see. My personal North Star vision is the Star Trek computer, because in that sci-fi series, pretty much the whole series, the focus is on the people, well, the other aliens, like, but it's on like the human species, or like the other sentient beings. There we go. It's not on the technology. The computer serves the people to enable them to like very easily call each other. I love the like tap, like, hello. It's so fun to me. But it's about the computer existing to serve the needs of the people, to assist what the people need to do to connect with each other, to visualize data, to manipulate visualizations in real time, to be able to, you know, fly a ship, to handle like transporting people, transporting goods, that type of thing. The technology in Star Trek enables the humans. And I like that sci-fi because it reminds us that like these are all choices, right? The things that we build are all choices. And like, what is the future that we want and how do we build that? And just kind of like, if we can walk back from that, it can help inform some of the decisions that we make today. So just remember, it's not inevitable. every single person that is building with this technology has the opportunity to make choices to help build the world that we want to be in. So that's what I'm trying to do. I appreciate, like, that sounds like what y'all are trying to do. So just like, individuals can make a difference. Remember that. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Jen.
Absolutely.